January 12, 1976, a 16-year-old girl leaves a friend's house in suburban Illinois to buy a soft drink. She never comes back. By morning, her body lies beside a road, arranged to look like a hit and run. The man who killed Pamela Maurer would die 5 years later, never once questioned. It would take 44 years and an opened grave to finally solve this cold case. Pamela Maurer was a 16-year-old junior at Downers Grove South High School. She lived with her parents in Woodridge, Illinois, a quiet suburb west of Chicago. Friends and classmates described her as responsible, warm, and outgoing. Her world revolved around the familiar rhythms of suburban teenage life, attending classes, studying, and spending time with a close circle of peers. To those who knew her best, Pamela was a dependable daughter and a loyal friend. On that cold January evening, Woodridge was quiet, wrapped in an ordinary winter routine that made the night seem entirely safe. On the evening of January 12, 1976, Pamela left a friend's house in Lisle, Illinois. It was between 9:30 and 10 p.m. when she stepped out into the freezing night. Her destination was a nearby McDonald's, just a short distance away, where she planned to buy a soft drink. It was an ordinary, quick errand, and she was expected back within minutes. Witnesses saw her heading toward the restaurant, but she never arrived, and she never returned to her friend's home. The minutes stretched into hours, and the silence grew heavy. Somewhere along that short path, in a brief span of unexplained time, Pamela vanished. Back at the house, her friends waited as the clock ticked past midnight, realizing with growing dread that something went wrong. Her parents spent the night calling the police and searching the dark streets, finding nothing in the cold. The mystery of her disappearance would finally collide with reality the following morning on the snowy shoulder of a nearby road. At 7:30 a.m. on January 13, 1976, a road maintenance crew working near the intersection of College Road and Maple Avenue in Lisle spotted a discarded purse. Inside, responding officers found Pamela's identification cards, establishing her identity. Just past the guardrail, her body lay on the snowy shoulder. To the first officers on the scene, the setup looked like a tragic traffic accident. The positioning of her body suggested she had been struck by a speeding vehicle. However, the physical evidence soon pointed to a much more deliberate and violent act. The DuPage County coroner quickly determined that the injuries on Pamela's body did not match a vehicle impact. There were no fractures or internal trauma typical of a high-speed collision. Instead, the medical examiner recognized the scene as a staged homicide. The subsequent autopsy established that Pamela had been sexually assaulted. Her cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to ligature strangulation, and investigators identified a 3-foot rubber hose found near her body as the likely instrument. Based on physical indicators like body temperature and rigor mortis, the coroner narrowed the time of death to a brief window shortly after she left her friend's house. This shifted the focus of the investigation entirely. Lisle and Woodridge police officers quickly organized a joint homicide investigation. Detectives searched the snowy roadside where Pamela's body was found, mapped the surrounding area, and interviewed local residents. They scrutinized traffic logs from that freezing January night, looking for any vehicle or driver that seemed out of place. Yet, in 1976, the forensic toolkit was remarkably limited. Officers preserved the biological evidence they recovered, but they possessed no DNA databases or computerized matching systems to analyze it. By 1979, after hundreds of interviews, every conventional lead had gone cold, and the departments formally marked the file inactive. The investigation stalled, leaving a killer to walk away entirely unnoticed. This unidentified man lived the remainder of his life in freedom, escaping all scrutiny. He died in 1981, never once arrested, charged, or questioned about the murder of Pamela Maurer, while her file sat on a shelf, waiting for technology to catch up. In 1993, investigators reopened Pamela's file, looking to new laboratory techniques to find answers. By 2001, DuPage County forensic scientists successfully generated a DNA profile from the biological material preserved since 1976. This profile was uploaded to CODIS, the national database that compares crime scene profiles with profiles already held by authorities. The search yielded no matches. This silence did not mean the sample had failed. It only meant that the killer's reference record was missing from the database. Rather than letting the trail go cold again, DuPage County custodians returned the physical and biological evidence to official custody, safeguarding its integrity. The investigation never truly stopped. A commitment later reflected in the Lisle Police Department's promise that they had never forgotten about Pam. For 44 years, the case remained unresolved, waiting for an entirely new method of comparison. In 2019, investigators turned to forensic genetic genealogy to break the decades-long stalemate. Analysts at Parabon Nanolabs uploaded the unknown male DNA profile to public databases, searching for distant biological relatives to construct a family tree. This mapping technique bypassed standard database limits, narrowing the search to a single family branch and yielding a lead. Bruce Lindahl. Born in Illinois, Lindahl had a history of violence, including a 1979 conviction for aggravated assault and a 1980 arrest for the kidnapping and rape of Deborah Colliander. His record and geographic ties positioned him as a candidate, a suspected serial killer linked to several unsolved local disappearances. However, he remained a genealogical lead, not yet a proven match. Because Bruce Lindahl died decades earlier, investigators could not simply request a standard DNA swab from a living suspect. To obtain a viable reference sample, they needed to take a far more drastic, legal step. In 2020, DuPage County authorities secured a court order authorizing forensic teams to exhume Lindahl's remains from a cemetery in Aurora. Working under strict protocols, forensic personnel successfully recovered skeletal material suitable for DNA testing. This recovered material finally supplied the missing reference sample required for a direct one-to-one comparison. Yet, securing the sample was only a procedural hurdle, not a resolution. The unresolved question remained: would this decades-old DNA match the profile left at the crime scene? In the cleanroom conditions of the forensic laboratory, scientists extracted genetic material from the exhumed remains to perform a direct one-to-one comparison. This was not a genealogical estimate, but a definitive short tandem repeat analysis. Technicians at the DuPage County Sheriff's Crime Laboratory and DNA Labs International compared the bone marrow profile directly against the seminal fluid preserved in a frozen state since 1976. Every step of the testing followed a strict chain of custody supported by rigorous quality controls and contamination safeguards. To ensure absolute certainty, a second independent laboratory verified the profiling results. The comparison was statistically conclusive, with the probability of a random match calculated at 1 in 1.8 quadrillion. The profiles matched perfectly, establishing Bruce Lindahl as the source of the biological material and the man who strangled Pamela Maurer. DNA doesn't die when the killer does. On January 13, 2020, 44 years to the day after Pamela's body was discovered, authorities announced the match to the public. If you believe there is no statute of limitations on the truth, subscribe and watch the full investigation. This definitive match closed Pamela's case, but its legal limits are clear. A single DNA confirmation does not prove Bruce Lindahl was responsible for every unsolved crime in the region, while a 2024 analysis linked his DNA to the 1979 murder of Kathy Hall. Other suspected cases remain unresolved and require independent evidence. The theory that Lindahl was one of Illinois's most active serial killers remains an ongoing investigation rather than a proven tally. Because Lindahl died in 1981, he never faced a courtroom, a jury, or a prison sentence. Conventional punishment was impossible, leaving only the quiet arrival of biological truth. Justice looks different when the answer comes after the suspect's death, offering evidentiary closure without courtroom accountability. The focus returns from the killer's notoriety to the memory of 16-year-old Pamela, whose life was stolen on a freezing January night. Her family has truth and peace, even if it arrived 44 years too late. If you believe there is no statute of limitations on the truth, subscribe and watch the full investigation. Today, forensic science ensures that even the grave cannot shield a killer from exposure. While other cases against Lindahl remain unproven, Pamela's breakthrough proves that time is no longer a sanctuary. Courtroom justice was denied, but her memory is finally freed from 44 years of silence.